Have you ever felt like your pet was trying to tell you something? A strange behavior, an unusual reaction, something that just didn't feel right? What if that warning was the only thing standing between life and death? For one family, their beloved dog, Lila, started acting strangely, growling at their newborn's crib every night, staring at the baby as if she saw something no one else could. At first, they dismissed it. Maybe she was just being protective. Maybe she was overreacting. But then, one terrifying night, everything changed, and they realized too late that Lila had been right all along. This is a story of instinct, love, and an unspoken warning that saved a life. A story that will make you think twice before ignoring your pet's intuition. If you love heartwarming and powerful stories like this, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell XXS so you never miss another incredible story. Let's dive in. Lisa had always believed that motherhood would come with its fair share of sleepless nights, but she never expected her dog, Lila, to be the cause of them. Ever since Jacob was born, Lila had been nothing short of a guardian angel, watching over him, lying by his crib, and even whimpering softly whenever he stirred in his sleep. Lisa and Mark had often smiled at the sight of their baby and their dog forming an unbreakable bond. But then, one night, everything changed. It started with a low, unfamiliar growl, the kind that made the hair on Lisa's arms stand on end. She woke up with a start, heart pounding against her ribs. It was coming from Jacob's nursery. Instinct took over. She shot out of bed and hurried down the hallway, barely breathing as she pushed open the door. The room was bathed in soft moonlight, casting long shadows over the crib. And there, sitting motionless at its base, was Lila. Her ears were pinned back, her body stiff, and her gaze locked onto Jacob. A deep, throaty growl rumbled from her chest. Lisa's breath caught in her throat. Lila had never acted this way before. She wasn't just watching Jacob, she was guarding him. But from what? With a shaky hand, Lisa reached out and turned on the nightlight. Jacob was sleeping peacefully, his tiny chest rising and falling in a slow rhythm. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. No intruders, no strange noises, just the eerie silence of the house and Lila's unwavering vigilance. "Lila, what's wrong?" Lisa whispered, crouching beside her. The dog flicked her eyes toward Lisa, but didn't stop growling. Panic twisted inside Lisa. Was something wrong with Jacob? She reached down and gently placed a hand on her baby's chest, feeling the steady warmth of his skin. He was fine. Perfectly fine. "Come on, girl, let's go," she coaxed, taking Lila's collar and guiding her out of the room. The dog resisted at first, reluctant to leave Jacob's side, but eventually she followed. Lisa shut the door behind her, exhaling the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She told herself it was nothing, a fluke. Maybe Lila had heard a distant noise, something beyond human perception. Maybe she was just being overly protective. But the next night, it happened again. At the same time, as though following some unseen cue, Lila returned to the crib and let out that same tense growl, night after night, without fail. And with each passing evening, Lisa's unease grew. Was it just a dog's instinct? Or was Lila sensing something Lisa and Mark couldn't see? Lisa couldn't ignore the gnawing sense of unease any longer. Something was wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on it. The logical part of her brain told her that Lila was just being overly protective, but deep down, a mother's intuition whispered otherwise. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she sat in Jacob's nursery, watching the soft glow of his nightlight cast gentle shadows across the walls. Lila lay curled beside the crib, her ears twitching at the slightest sound. Lisa ran her fingers through the dog's fur, feeling the tension beneath the surface. "Tell me, girl," she murmured. "What are you trying to warn me about?" Lila didn't respond, but her breathing was heavy, deliberate, as if she were on edge. Mark walked in, rubbing his temple, exhaustion clear in his eyes. "Lisa, we can't keep losing sleep over this. Maybe she's just stressed. New baby, new routine. Dogs pick up on that." Lisa sighed, knowing he was trying to be rational. But it wasn't enough. "I need to know, Mark. What if we're missing something?" With reluctance, Mark agreed to set up a baby monitor with a camera that could capture everything in the nursery overnight. If something was happening, they would see it. That night, Lisa lay in bed, staring at the monitor screen with Mark beside her. Jacob's room was bathed in the usual warm light, and Lila was in her usual position by the crib. Minutes passed, then an hour. Then it happened. Lila's body tensed abruptly. Her ears shot up, eyes widening as if she were sensing something unseen. Slowly, she got to her feet, her tail stiff. Then came the growl, low, guttural, almost primal. Lisa sat up straighter. "Mark, look." On the screen, Jacob was still, his tiny chest rising and falling steadily in sleep. The room was undisturbed. There was nothing there. And yet, Lila continued to stare into the crib, her muscles tight, growling as if something, or someone, stood just inches away from the baby. A chill ran down Lisa's spine. "What the hell is she looking at?" Mark muttered, his face pale in the glow of the monitor. Lisa shook her head, a lump forming in her throat. "I don't know." They watched, transfixed, as Lila let out a sharp bark, stepping closer to the crib. But nothing happened. No movement, no shadow, no sign of anything unusual. Yet the air felt heavier. The next morning, Lisa and Mark took Lila to the vet, hoping for an explanation. But after a thorough examination, the doctor assured them that Lila was in perfect health. "She's not sick. No signs of distress beyond what you've described," the vet said, tapping her pen on the clipboard. "Dogs can sense things we can't. Maybe she's reacting to something, a sound, a scent. Has anything changed in your home?" Lisa and Mark exchanged a look. Nothing had changed, except for Lila's strange behavior. The vet's words only deepened their unease. They consulted a dog trainer who suggested that Lila might be detecting something beyond human perception, perhaps a subtle gas leak, an electrical current, or even an unnatural presence. Lisa took it a step further. That evening, she called in a home inspector, requesting a thorough scan for any hazardous issues, gas leaks, structural weaknesses, anything. The man checked every corner of the house, ran tests, and double-checked the nursery. By the time he finished, he gave them a single frustrating answer. "There's nothing wrong with your house." Lisa swallowed hard. Then why won't she stop? The inspector shrugged. "Animals have instincts. Maybe she's sensing something you can't." That answer didn't bring any comfort. As days passed, the exhaustion set in. Every night, Lisa and Mark waited for the inevitable moment when Lila would stiffen, growl, and act as if something invisible lurked near Jacob's crib. Every night, the same cycle repeated. Lisa was at her breaking point. They needed sleep. They needed peace. Mark had even suggested the unthinkable, rehoming Lila if her behavior didn't improve. Lisa refused. But then, on one fateful night, everything escalated. Lisa had barely closed her eyes when she was jolted awake. Not by growling, but by frantic, desperate barking. The kind of barking that sent ice down her spine. Mark sat up instantly. "That's not normal." Lisa was already on her feet, her pulse thundering in her ears. The second she opened the nursery door, Lila bolted past her, leaping against the crib with enough force to rattle the wooden frame. "Lila, stop!" Lisa cried, but the dog ignored her. Then, something even more terrifying happened. Lila turned to Lisa, her eyes wild with urgency, and grabbed at the fabric of Lisa's pajama pants with her teeth, yanking hard, not just nudging, pulling her toward the crib. Lisa's heart nearly stopped. Her gaze snapped to Jacob, and her world came crashing down. Jacob wasn't moving. Her body acted before her mind caught up. She lunged toward the crib, hands trembling as she scooped her son up. His face was eerily still, his lips tinged with a faint blue hue. "Jacob," her voice cracked. "Jacob, wake up." Nothing. Her breath came in short gasps, panic clawing at her chest. Then, Lila growled again, stepping forward and nudging Jacob's tiny chest with her nose. A beat of silence. Then another. Then, a gasp. Jacob's tiny body convulsed as he sucked in a desperate, shuddering breath. A wail broke through the air, sharp and piercing. Lisa sobbed, clutching her son as tears streamed down her face. Mark stumbled into the room, his expression a mix of horror and relief. They had nearly lost him. The next morning, Doctors confirmed what Lisa and Mark feared. Jacob had sleep apnea, a condition that caused him to stop breathing while asleep. If Lila hadn't woken them up in time, Lisa couldn't even think about what could have happened. As she sat beside Jacob's hospital bed, Lila curled at her feet. She finally understood. Lila hadn't been the threat. She had been the savior. And Lisa knew, without a doubt, she would never question her again. The sterile smell of the hospital filled Lisa's senses as she cradled Jacob in her arms. His small chest rose and fell steadily now, each breath a reassuring sign that he was safe. But the image of his pale, unmoving face from the night before was burned into her memory. She shuddered at the thought of what could have happened if Lila hadn't been there. Mark sat beside her, staring at their son with a haunted expression. His fingers twitched, as if he wanted to reach out but was too afraid. "We almost lost him, Lisa," he whispered. His voice was barely audible, thick with guilt. "I almost—" He stopped, his jaw tightening. "I almost sent her away." Lisa looked down at Lila, who lay curled up at her feet, her deep brown eyes watching Jacob, ever vigilant. The dog had barely moved since they arrived, her body still tense despite the safe environment. Lisa reached down and ran her fingers through Lila's fur, feeling the warmth, the life, the loyalty beneath her touch. "No," she murmured. "We just didn't understand." Lila let out a low sigh, as if she too had been carrying the weight of fear. The past weeks must have been agonizing for her, trying to warn them, trying to protect Jacob when no one else could see the danger. The door creaked open, and a doctor stepped inside, holding a clipboard. His expression was calm, professional, but kind. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," he began, "Jacob's test results confirm that he has infant sleep apnea. His breathing was obstructed, which is why he stopped breathing last night." Lisa sucked in a sharp breath, holding Jacob a little tighter. "We're lucky you caught it in time," the doctor continued, glancing down at Lila. "Or rather, lucky that she did." Mark looked at the doctor, his voice hollow. "What happens now? How do we make sure this doesn't happen again?" "There are treatment options," the doctor assured them. "We'll be monitoring him closely, and in severe cases, there are medical interventions available. But now that you know, you can take precautions. A specialized baby monitor, positioning his sleeping posture carefully, regular checkups. These will all help. The most dangerous thing about sleep apnea is when it goes unnoticed." Lisa's throat tightened. Unnoticed. That word echoed in her mind. They might have never known, if Lila hadn't been there. Lisa looked down at the golden retriever once more, tears stinging her eyes. "She noticed," she whispered. The doctor smiled slightly. "It's not uncommon. Dogs have an incredible ability to sense distress, even things we don't pick up on. Some can detect illnesses, seizures, changes in breathing. It's instinct, but in this case, it was also love." Lisa wiped at her eyes, overwhelmed. Mark reached down and rubbed Lila's head, his fingers gentle, reverent. "I'm sorry, girl," he murmured. "I should have trusted you." Lila lifted her head and licked his hand, her tail thumping softly against the hospital floor. Forgiveness. That was the kind of creature she was, endlessly loyal, endlessly forgiving. When they returned home that evening, exhaustion settled into Lisa's bones, but a newfound clarity came with it. The house felt different. The nursery, once a place of uncertainty and fear, now felt like the safest room in the house. Not because of the baby monitor they had installed, but because of the golden-furred guardian who lay beside the crib. Lila walked straight into the room without hesitation, settling down in her usual spot next to Jacob's crib. Lisa watched as she let out a quiet breath, her body finally relaxing. The mission she had struggled with for weeks had been understood. Mark stood beside Lisa, observing the scene with a deep frown. "I don't get it," he admitted. "How did she know?" Lisa exhaled slowly. "Maybe it's something beyond what we can explain. Maybe it's instinct. Maybe it's love. Maybe it's both." Mark shook his head, crouching down and running his fingers through Lila's fur. "She saved his life," he said, as if he were still trying to process it. Lisa nodded. "She did." From that night on, everything changed. They still used the baby monitor, still took every precaution possible. But no device, no machine, no expert made Lisa feel as safe as the knowledge that Lila was there, watching, waiting, protecting. Jacob was too young to understand, but one day, Lisa knew she would tell him this story. The story of how a dog's love, loyalty, and unshakable instinct had kept him alive when no one else realized the danger. And as she stood in the doorway, watching Lila rest peacefully beside Jacob's crib, she understood something profound. Some protectors don't need words. Some heroes have 4 legs and a wagging tail. And sometimes, love is knowing when to listen, even when you don't understand. As Lisa watched Jacob sleep peacefully in his crib, with Lila curled beside him like a silent sentinel, she realized that life had given them a gift, a protector they never knew they needed. This experience had changed her. It had changed Mark. They had learned that love isn't always loud. Sometimes it speaks in quiet warnings, in unwavering vigilance, in a presence that never wavers even when no one understands. Lila had been more than a pet. She had been a guardian, a hero without a cape, a force of nature that sensed danger before it struck. And what if they hadn't listened? What if they had ignored the growls, dismissed the warnings, sent her away? Jacob might not have been here today. The thought chilled Lisa to her core. So she made a silent promise to always listen, to never take loyalty for granted, to respect the instincts of those who love unconditionally. Because some heroes don't wear uniforms. They don't have superpowers or titles. Sometimes they walk on 4 legs, with fur as golden as the sun and eyes filled with nothing but love. And sometimes the ones who save us are the ones we almost didn't believe. This story is a reminder. Animals don't just coexist with us. They understand us in ways we don't always comprehend. They sense our fears, our pains, and even dangers we cannot see. Their love is pure, their loyalty unwavering. If you have a pet, pay attention. Maybe they're trying to tell you something. Maybe they see what you cannot. And if you ever find yourself doubting an animal's intuition, remember Lila, the dog who knew before anyone else did. Sometimes love is silent protection, and sometimes the best guardian angels don't have wings.